Hello, my name is Gradius, and a great man named Karl von Clausewitz said that in war, more than anywhere else, things do not turn out as we expect. Join me as we discover the lessons to be learned in the weird, odd, and sometimes crazy military engagements in unusual battles of history. Today we are traveling back to the Dark Ages to witness the battle that saved not only Western Europe, but knighthood as well, and witness what was to be the turning point in a war between two major religions. It is 732 AD, and Europe is under threat from the Islamic Moors. Having conquered Spain from the Visigoths, the Moors have turned their gaze north towards Gaul. At this time in history, it has been 300 years since the fall of the Western Roman Empire, and its old lands are bitterly contested. Europe is in chaos, with constant fighting over territory, and there is only one nation ready to fight the Moorish horde, and that is the Franks. The Franks were a semi-barbarian people who arrived in the late 5th century. Using superb heavy infantry, they kicked out the Visigoths in Gaul and settled down in the Western Roman Empire's old cities, where they converted to Christianity and flourished. By the 8th century, their empire stretched from the English Channel to the Mediterranean Sea to even Bavaria and Saxony. However, they were largely fragmented until Charles united them under his rule in 714 AD. The Moors, on the other hand, were part of the Umayyad Caliphate, who ruled the Muslim Empire at the time. The Moors invaded Spain in 711 AD, and by the year 720, they were largely in control of Iberia and had started raiding over the Pyrenees into France, with one raid reaching as far as the Rhone Valley. In 730 AD, the new leader named Abd ar-Rahman led an invasion into France and defeated a force under the Duke of Aquitaine at Bordeaux. Rahman then marched to Poitiers, where he ran into Charles's army near Tours in 732. It is largely debated as to the location of the battle and the number of soldiers in both armies, but it is believed that the conflict happened between Tours and Poitiers, where the rivers Claine and Vienne meet. The Moors probably fielded around 60,000 men, while the Franks numbered between 15,000 and 30,000 soldiers. The Moors had become overly confident and neglected to send out scouting parties, and thus they were surprised to find the Frankish host, under Charles, blocking the way to Tours. Rahman immediately sent out messengers to tell his raiding parties to return for battle. Charles had wisely chosen to fight a defensive battle, as the swift Moorish horsemen would ride circles around his heavy infantry if the Franks charged. The Franks were also fighting on their home territory, while the Moors were far from home and their supplies were short. The Moors could either retreat, which was the wise thing to do, or attack. They chose the latter. Still, it took 6 days for the raiding parties to rejoin Rahman. On the 7th day, the Moors decided to risk battle. The battle started with the Franks set up in a defensive position on a small hill with the rivers behind them. The Moors' main tactic was repeated cavalry charges against the Frankish shield wall. As they got close, some horsemen threw javelins. The Franks responded with the Francisca. These double-headed throwing axes had been adopted as the Franks' national symbol. They were heavy, one-handed throwing axes that could cleave through most armor and shields. The Moors did not have much of either. The Moorish horsemen repeatedly smashed into the Frankish line using javelins and spears, but the Franks remained unbroken. One Moorish chronicler, who wrote about the battle, said, "The men of the north stood motionless as a wall. They were like a belt of ice frozen together, and were not dissolved as they slew the Arab with the sword." Some horsemen did manage to get through the line, but they were met by the Franks held in reserve and were quickly annihilated. It was at this time in the battle that Charles's scouts managed to sneak around the battle and attack the Moorish camp. The Moors were afraid the Franks would make off with all their loot taken from raiding, so most charged back to the camp. This left Rahman to be surrounded and cut down by the Franks. With the loss of their leader, the Moors made a hasty retreat, and the Franks entered victoriously into the Moorish camp the next day when they found it deserted. The Battle of Tours was important for several reasons. First, Charles would be forever known as Charles Martel, meaning the hammer. Secondly, was the fact that Charles Martel discovered the importance of cavalry. He therefore created his own heavy cavalry, which was to become the precursor to the medieval knight. Lastly, it is theorized that if Charles Martel had lost the Battle of Tours, then the Moors might have overrun a large portion of Europe. This is a plausible theory, as the Franks were the only ones powerful enough at the time to stop any sort of invasion. Therefore, if it weren't for Charles Martel, we most likely would have had no medieval age, no knights in shining armor, no Charlemagne, Charles Martel's grandson, and possibly no papacy or Catholicism. As so much was riding on this one battle, that makes it very unusual. This has been another episode of Unusual Battles in History. Thank you very much for watching.